Good afternoon. Here we are, Damien. We're here. Welcome everybody to the Sunday chat. It's been a while. It feels like
Again.
these weeks have been going the way they've been going. So we have Rasa. Hello, Rasa.
Yo.
And of course we have Comic Board or Black Bull or Matt is with us too. Hello.
Yeah, thanks. Great to be here. I'm sorry I missed you last time.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's good to have you. It's nice to have people that want to come and hang out and rotating cast and crew. So that's great.
You have to always pick up a slack. So when somebody else comes, like, thank God,
Yeah.
man. The pensioners here. Come on, people.
Yeah. We have somebody named Evening with us as well too. So hello.
Hello.
So today we're on a little bit of. I was just saying before we went live on a little bit of a time schedule. So we're going to do a couple hours today. But thanks very much for everybody for joining us and watching in the future. Shall we just kind of jump into it?
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, okay. Matt, why don't you start us off? Why don't you give her?
Okay, all right.
Let's put him on the spot. Let's see how
see how you perform.
Yeah. We got to dance around like a monkey. Well, I'm going to talk about something which I'm sure a lot of you have read. Maybe even, I don't know if you guys have read this, The Trees by Warren Ellis. Oh, you haven't?
No,
Okay.
Yeah, I've been very curious about it though. I know about it, but I've never read it.
Yeah, so this is the second read through, and I'll show some pictures while I'm talking as we struggle with the glare here. There we go.
Oh man,
because Jason Howard's artwork is outstanding. His artwork and his coloring. Without giving a ton away with it, I'm sure a lot of people already know the premise of it. These large alien structures arrive on the Earth all throughout. And this is what they kind of look like. They're called trees. And they have no idea what they are. They've been there for a decade when we start out the story. And they haven't really communicated with anybody or anything. They haven't done much. And so there's this mystery around them. And some people are just totally used to them. No, it's just like part of the habitat. And other people are trying to figure out what their business is doing here. They're obviously of alien origin. And we get like 4 or 5 different locations. And so this first trade is actually 8 issues. That's the second one. First trade's actually 8 issues. Second one was 6. And the first 2 are great. I was just in love with this. Like, here's some of this coloring, the artwork that he does.
Oh yeah, nice one, man.
Really nice.
Yeah.
Good depth, man. Ooh.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and it's like this throughout. Like, he just kind of blows you away. And we get there's one of these things had landed, one of these trees had landed in the Arctic, and we're starting to see. Let's see which side. This side here. These symbols show up, and these black like poppies show up growing in the Arctic, and they've got a scientist there who's trying to figure out what the ordeal is, like why these showed up. And then when they did, there was something with electromagnetism that sent this tree off, and had like helicopters crashed and all their test equipment went down in the Arctic. And so there's all this mystery through these first 14 issues. And I was just really jiving on it, man. I burned through the first trade, those first 8 issues in one sitting, and the second one I did the same thing. Wow. And I knew it was only 3 volumes. And then I picked up the third volume, and the third trade is like kind of like a self-contained story that takes place in Russia. And all 5 issues were around there and didn't really tie into the tree was involved, but that was it. Like all the mysteries he set up in these first 2, like with this scientist in the Arctic and these black poppies that were showing up. And there was a one tree landed in Africa, and it divided out African countries where the poor one became rich, the rich one became poor. And so the one that became poor ended up mounting like weaponry on there and started firing on the other side from it. So you get like this mix of these things land. Some people don't pay attention to it. One lands in New York, floods everything. People get on with their lives. They have a little story with the mayor there. Other people want to take advantage of them or use them as tourism or use them as a way to take power and gain control. And so the first 14 issues had all these kind of weaving stories. And then the last 5 issues were just like a one-off that didn't really tie in with anything. And none of the characters from those 14 issues were in there. And it was such a letdown because I knew that it was only going to be the 3 volumes because part of it is, I think, with Warren Ellis and what's going on with his name right now. But the second thing is that I read this on Reddit, and somebody had quoted from his newsletter just saying that he had wrote that he had originally only planned 3 volumes, and this was all the story was ever going to be. And I have a hard time believing that after you read those first 14 issues and see the groundwork that was laid and this mystery and intrigue. It was almost like they had to complete their contract and they needed one more volume, so we're just going to write a story. That's what it felt like. I don't know if that's what happened, but it was so disappointing because it was 14 really good issues, and then just nothing got closed up. And I'm okay with leaving it like ambiguous as to what happened or why these trees are here and what's going on. But there was so much story set up that to have like this one-shot 5 issue that didn't really tie in with any of our other characters, it just felt really empty at the end.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's really unfortunate. So yeah, like you said, I wonder if that has something to do with it, his name and what's been going on recently. But I mean, because it's an interesting idea to take kind of like a break from the main story to sort of jump to another time and then come back to it. But if that's it, that's kind of a bummer. Yeah, exactly. And it's like I said, they had just all these really, just the idea of these trees landing. Yeah. And then like his exploration of like all the different ways humanity was going to deal with it. Trying to get power, not caring about it eventually. And then the mystery of these poppies coming up. There was just all this intrigue around it that it was so good. And then the last one was like basically one person in a small town in Russia that controlled the rail lines and not wanting to let people get in or out, wanted to keep things the way they were technology wise and all that. And then this murder and a sheriff. And that was it. Whereas all these other ones, you turn through like 8 or 9 pages in Africa, and then you're in Brazil, and then you're in New York City, and it just moved around, and the characters kind of weaved in and out. Right. So good up to that point. Yeah.
It's quite sad when always those kind of series, when it picks up the notch and you start getting excited and suddenly like a slap on your face and you're like, okay, right. But I think with Warren Ellis lately, I mean, whatever the new books he was producing, it seems to be always had kind of the like really good. He makes people excited, and suddenly people stop talking about it. Something just happens, and I know maybe he loses interest, or maybe he's extra curriculum he's doing, or talking about that. You know what I mean? So maybe that's got involved. But as a writer, it's really exciting, and he can bring up the story quite quickly for you to understand exactly what or at least the hints of a story, what he wants to portray. But then suddenly it's a peep, boom, and it's just like, I always doubt. I mean, the best thing of Warren Ellis, I'm thinking that the DC's is it Authority or something like that run one of the things is I really like the reading of it, and that's the only thing I remember that's like clearly in my mind. But other things is like great, especially like Hellblazer stuff. I think he done, isn't it? Anyway, so yeah, kind of disappointing though with that because I heard when people were talking on YouTube as well, picking up in singles, and people really getting excited about it as well.
Yeah. So do you feel like with those first 2 volumes, if you just read those, you'd feel like, even though it's kind of not kind of an ending, do you feel like there's enough there to bring you in? Like you still kind of feel like a contained story to some degree, or does it really leave you on a cliffhanger?
Yeah, and it's not that it's the cliffhanger, it's just like all the mystery that's kind of set up throughout. Like there's the political side with New York, and there's those poppies, and like they start growing out of where they shouldn't be. Then they're growing out of dead people. And then this whole idea of like, there were like electromagnetic cells within these poppies. Like there was like AI basically within them. Oh yeah. And none of that really gets kind of explained as to what happens with it. They just kind of touch on it. So if you're somebody who can just live with like having the story kind of cut off, pick up the first 2 trades and then don't do the other one. I'll say this though too. The first 2 trades, Jason Howard's art is unbelievable. It is really, really up my alley as far as his color palette, his detail, how he draws. I couldn't believe how good it was. So I would definitely recommend the first 2 volumes, just knowing that you're not going to get a complete story. It's just going to be 2 volumes of good artwork and good storytelling.
Yeah, cool. Yeah.
Disappointing.
Yeah. It was kind of that week for me. Like up until yesterday, everything I had read was like, it was forgettable. It wasn't bad. It was just kind of like some average stuff. But I was trying to think about like, what am I going to talk about? What books do I want to bring? And like all of them were like, well, I did read that, but I don't really remember much about it. Like it was just unmemorable. Yeah. And I had one of those weeks where it was like that with everything. It was really hard to get churning on something good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Fringe being the big one that you and I were both reading. Dude, what a disappointment.
I put my last 2 issues away. I have like a
Yeah,
box for stuff I need to read, and then my red box ready.
Right.
And I actually just this morning I'm like, yeah, I think I'm done with it.
Yeah,
Unless
yeah.
you came out and told me 5 and 6 were great, I'm like, yeah, I don't have much interest in it.
Which series did you guys talking about?
This one called, just to show it quickly, this Fringe from Caliber.
Okay.
That started out like super strong on
Yes.
issue 1. I've only got the first 6, and I read the first 5, and I'm in the same boat. Like, it's packed up, it's ready to go into the bins. I'm not gonna be finishing it. It kind of just went in a direction that just wasn't interesting at all. And I don't know if they thought it was going to be interesting and they were just playing with this, but it really just starts meandering, where I stopped even reading the pages as I was going in those last ones. I would read a couple of captions and that was it, because it just held absolutely zero interest, so yeah.
That makes me feel so good though, because those are one of those books sometimes where you're like, am I supposed to be understanding what's going on here?
Yeah.
Like, am I just not smart enough to get what's happening here?
Right.
And then I see your Twitter stuff come back and I'm like, whew, it's not just me.
Yeah. Well, it seems like there might have been this era of writing of like this sort of, let's just make these disjointed sentences. Let's just put these captions and let's just have this bizarre, like, quote unquote, we're going to write like a weird writer. You know what I mean? Like, and it's like not understanding that you still have to have ideas behind it, and it still has to like move somewhere. You can't just do 3 issues in a row where you have this super ball that's bouncing around telling just talking shit. You know what I mean? Like, it actually has to have something behind it, right? So I don't know. And it seems like there's this sort of like this type of, maybe they thought it was this surrealist kind of writing or something like that, that it was going to just all of a sudden evolve into something and just letting things go. And it's like, nah, you gotta rein that shit in somehow, so yeah.
It was especially disappointing because those first 2 issues, like you'd mentioned, were great. I really enjoyed like the idea of they set up these corporations and we're gonna have the evil corporations, and we got the guy that's kind of like sneaking in and is gonna play havoc on them, and they set totally. Up, and then all that went away besides the crazy guy in the Super Bowl, and like the businessmen quit showing up, and it reminds me of Trees a little bit in that manner. Yeah.
Well, and then also that inker, they had an inker on the first 4 issues.
Yeah.
And I thought he was fantastic. And then he leaves. And then so that 5th issue, the art, then there wasn't even the art for me to enjoy, because even when the story was kind of boring in those first 4, like the number 3 and 4, the art was still really, really nice. There was a really nice style going on. So at least I could kind of like go panel to panel and enjoy that. But once that anchor left, it really brought the quality down, like just a huge jump down, right? So, and it's disappointing. I mean, that's the gamble with this stuff, and I'm fine with that. But I mean, you kind of hope when you have such a strong first couple issues, you hope that you've sort of uncovered some gem, this forgotten gem out there in the 50-cent bins or whatever, right? So, Marasa, what do you got?
Okay, I'll come with I don't think it was disappointing at all, but it just left me a little bit sad. And I comic way of being kind of sad, but this is particularly the way it's sad. It just brought me kind of thinking again. So this is a raid by Jessica Campbell, and it's drawn quarterly. Another library find. This is very striking cover, so of course I picked it up just to have that tiny little book. It's a small Lavender comic. Come on, comic, come here. There you go. Tiny little thing. And so this is a she's Canadian, if I'm recalling correctly. And it starts about basically teenager. It's a story about the teenagers and how a religious part of your life comes in fruition with your hormones, and how very religious background where you basically growing up. And the main character, I don't know if it's just this is the lady, the girl. This one here, she is basically going through her life and unresolved or unknown sexuality part of it as well. So imagine you being brought up in church, like your parents are pushing you to go to church, and the church is telling you, how bad it is to be like pregnant. So the ironic part is the man, whoever is in charge, I don't know how you call it, is like, it's not a priest, but it's like a pastor, let's say it this way. His daughter is pregnant, and he's basically put her on the spot while he's preaching about his daughter, that, you know, don't do what she did. And she's like, what, 14, 15, and she's pregnant, and she's basically hiding there because her dad is basically telling her life story to everybody in the church and telling her as an example, don't do it like that. And it's just absolutely like the amount of pressure you put on your own child. Yes, she made a mistake, but imagine how her life will be after that, when she's going to have to just to deal with the other disappointments in her life or mistakes. So in that sense, it was kind of heartbreaking, because they even made the talk, and she's saying, I'm never going to do it. It's just kind of crazy. But anyway, so life goes on, and then we're following those two characters, and basically two girls in the classroom gets to be appointed into being part of the create, like they have a task to achieve, so they have to merge together in the groups to talk about Neanderthals. I think they were talking about prehistorical things. So it has really quite interesting notes. Look, Terence, that's for you, Terence.
Oops. There you go. Thank you, Rasa.
My pleasure. Always oblige. So basically, those girls, like, they don't really like each other, because in the same classroom, but, you know, like in different kind of perspective of because she's very religious, and the school friend who's basically working with her, she's like into magic. So it's kind of interesting, that take. So it basically has this verbal conversations and stuff, and very, as you can see, simple drawing style of our Jessica Campbell's and stuff. But the amount, like, so she has a unibrow. She's like, let me help you with that. You know?
That's intense.
Yeah, magician girls basically turn her from that to this. And you're like, oh, okay. So they go out, and of course the man approaches them, and he's like, so this douchebag approaches them, and it's like, yeah, hello, and then it's like, don't talk to me, you know, like girls, teenagers, like, ew, don't talk to me, kind of thing. Don't. And then he's like, turns around and says, like, don't wear shit like that. It's like, okay, why? I mean, I can wear whatever I want. So it's that teenage angst story. The word spoiler alert, I have to tell you, because it's kind of major part for her to understand that her life is her friend kills herself, because they go into a relationship. They become really close to each other, and they start to think, like, you know, this is it, we are together, everything goes through. But she basically, the girl who's very religious, turns her down because of family kind of, like, you know, pressure, because, you know, she knows how the family will be even thinking about it, like how much sin or how many Hail Marys she would have to tell after, if they will, you know, confront her with her sexuality. So she basically says she dumps her, and unfortunately the girl kills herself. Because I don't know if because of that, she kind of doesn't disclose, but it's very. So what I meant by it from the beginning is, I just felt so down. Even though it's nice that you explore and show that, you know, that other side of your, how the parenting goes, how the teenagers behave, and all that stuff, which was lovely done, and really kind of subtle way you introduce you to everything else. But that part of where when she dies, and everybody's just like, she's not there anymore in the classroom, and she's looking at the table, it's just like, nah, man, why are you doing this? You know, because you had quirky moments which really helped the storyline to go in fruition. And honestly, with art like that, you need, for me, let's say this way, in my back of my head while I was reading, it's like, I needed that verbal, like, really strong story to tell me, to basically acknowledge the artwork. Not saying I'm judging, I'm just saying that's how my brain was processing that.
Yeah.
While I was reading it. So I was sold, but I just was like, you know, like, you put down the book, and I was like, huh, really? It's like, I was glad that I explored it. You know what I mean? It's really helps this cover. You know, it stands out from the crowd straight away.
Yeah.
So when I walk in the shop, it's just like, oh, look at this bright color. Love. And I think when we are speaking about the book covers, how it matters to people, I think it does matter in this one in particular, because at the end of the day, the story behind. Well worth read. I think it would be quite interesting maybe to show to teenagers, to actually, because sometimes they don't think everything around them happens the same what happens to them. So it's very interesting to actually show them to see how they would react. Of course, you have to be kind of tentative if you're religious or in that sense of that, because that it does touch it and it kind of comes into your play. For me, I don't believe. But it was interesting for me to get into this from that point of view. So it opens your eyes a little bit, and it's really well written. That's what I'm trying to say. But it's just like, I wanted a bit more. Like a better, happier. Because sometimes teenagers' stories usually tend to go kind of downwards, never usually upwards. It takes a while for them in life. If you, of course, survive everything, whatever happens to you, it goes upwards. Of course, there's a light at the end of the tunnel for sure. But
you
have to go through those hormones, unfortunately.
Well, and I think a lot of the times too, with a lot of these storytellers, especially the kind of critique of indie storytellers, is this kind of always this decline. There's always this sense of something kind of comes to inevitable doom by the end of the story. It's like, so as much as you want that to uplift at the end, it ain't gonna happen. Then there's something about those panels that you showed there with the empty desk. There's an extra layer of kind of, I mean, that style of art lends itself even more to it for some reason. I don't know why, because there's this stiffness to it, so it really brings an extra kind of layer of tension, right?
Really, afterwards, that you have your panels in, like your lockers, and then there's this message. There's more messages coming. It works.
That's pretty neat.
She doesn't really like this. She doesn't really need to tell much of the storyline. She's like, she's basically trying to bring up another conversation with another girl, but the girl is not interested. And she's basically remembers everything because they're basically talking about her again, what happened. And she didn't, of course, tell that they had a relationship, the girl who's dead, unfortunately. And it's, as I say, those little things, like what she's doing in here, like break out this panel from one page, it works beautifully because it tells the story really well. And you follow the character quite, like without getting lost, because she's creating the panels really well with that, like that kind of panel. So she's walking down, and the character, you just basically follow her down the neighborhood, and it's really good. So as I say, really, I wanted, because Campbell's everywhere, I see. So I was like, okay, see Campbell, I'm gonna basically try to see what's happening in here. And then of course he ends up of the story of the guy, or the same priest whose daughter is pregnant. He has a story to tell that she sinned and blah blah, and kind of that part of it. I like me, because I have a bit of that religion, like I don't know, I just wasn't really interested in that part of it. But as I say, this is really endearing and sad, but really well. I think it just lends your eye, saying like, now as I say, I don't judge art anymore as critically as used to be from the beginning of my comic book reading. Before I used to like everything perfect. We were like, it's asymmetrical, everything. Please, a hand going like absolutely bonkers. I used to like hate on it. I was like, you look at him, he doesn't know how to draw. It's like, bullshit. It's actually opened my mind to a lot of other artists, and just go with it. Let them tell you the storyline and then judge after that. It's kind of the integral part, which I've been learning quite a lot since I opened my eyes to explore. You know what I mean?
And I mean, you end up finding your niche with everything, right? Like you end up finding, there's still going to be styles that work and not. Donald Rex, I mean, that like Donald is saying here, I think it's one of the things that we champion all the time. Like there's too much pressure of like the new books and the expensive books and things. There's so many more options out there, exploring dollar bins, exploring the library. So that's good, Donald. Be interesting to see what you find out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that looks pretty good, Ross. I like that one.
Yeah, and you mentioned Terrence's idea of like we've got all these teenage angst stories, or these stories where they just got to end on a downer note, especially with indie comics. And I go through those phases where I'll read 30 of them and none of them really hit home. And then you read one that has a real big impact. And it's like, wow, that person knows how to do it right. But it seems like there's a plethora of those kind of stories out there now, or diary comics where people are just kind of reliving their past life and telling the story through it. And I find that like 85% of them are kind of mundane. And then you pick up on 15% where it's like, wow, the creator really has something to say, and they say it well. Yeah.
Yeah. Some sort of, again, the some sort of magic. There's some sort of understanding that genre and understanding the form and bringing something just a little bit unique to it. Yeah, it's tricky. It ain't easy to do, that's for sure. So I got kind of like a twofer, one just to kind of briefly mention, and then the one that we'll talk about a little more detail. They're both from Mark Kalasniko, that I got from my comic shop. Why Did Pete Duel Kill Himself? And then Mail Order Bride, which was a hefty volume. Just quick words about this one. This was a good one. It seems to be his autobiographical stories are he's sort of this dog character, and he kind of just, in this one, there's an actor that ends up killing himself, and his kind of younger self doesn't understand why, because he was this popular actor, he was this handsome guy, he had this fame and fortune, and why the heck would anybody want to kill themselves? And then he goes through his life and kind of reliving memories of his childhood and things that have happened to him as he's been growing up, and he does not have a happy childhood. He does not end up killing himself. There is nothing like that at the end of this one. It just sort of leaves it at a place that's, this is just his reality. And kind of on the last couple of pages, he ends up sort of falling in line with some of the other group as they're laughing at somebody in the classroom, and he kind of feels this peer pressure around him and ends up kind of participating, because again, he gets to this point where he doesn't want to be singled out, so he just sort of falls in line with the group. So really interesting storytelling in this one. But the one that kind of blew me away more out of both of them was this Mail Order Bride. It's like 400 and something page, 261 pages, and I read it in another one of those, like just reading in one sitting. I just couldn't put it down. Such a fascinating story, such an amazing style, and it really is about this guy who gets himself a Korean bride through this magazine ad. Hello, Jackio. Well said. So this our main character here. He's an owner of a kind of collectibles store, sells comics and toys, but is also a collector himself. And he ends up getting his Korean bride. And just again, the thing that Kalasniko is really good at is slowly unfolding this repetition kind of used as a way to kind of move you through a story. And like it starts off just really kind of sweet and just kind of goes from there as each of them are kind of looking for their own identities. And it has a bit of a downbeat kind of ending where they sort of kind of come to terms with their realities, and they don't look happy by the end of the book. But it's such a really great journey, especially for the main our main female character, whose name I'm blanking on right now. But she really starts to explore art and kind of finds this more bohemian part of the city, where she starts to kind of experiment in photography and hanging out with these painters and just kind of exploring her creative side herself as well too. And ends up having a little show of her work, of her photography. And it's really a great arc, and you just get to this depth to each of these characters that, again, it's so hard to do with the kind of line drawings on a page, but you really start to know these characters, and you really start to kind of feel for them in their situations. Because as much as the husband is kind of an asshole at times, you end up really feeling for him too. Like, yes, his vision is skewed, like the things that he wants out of this sort of trophy wife, or as they end up calling it in the book, there's these guys that have, I guess, what they refer to as yellow fever. They just have this kind of, they fetishize these Asian, because a couple of times he ends up saying Japanese, Korean, what's the difference? You know what I mean? And wants her to kind of dress up in a certain way to meet his fantasies. So as kind of horrible as that shit is, you start to feel for the guy, because he's just this confused, kind of lonely, sad character, you know what I mean? Who just wants some form of camaraderie, but wants it in a very, very specific way, where she just has this kind of wild side to her that she wants to explore, but she's also too afraid as well. So you get all this beautiful art, and there's a moment where she discovers this interpretive dance troupe in this kind of part of town, and the pages really just soak up the ink, And it's a really, really impactful moment, because it's so impactful for her, the way he portrays it on the page. It's impactful as a reader as well. And of course, I'm not finding the pages here. Give me 1 second. But I just thought it was a really, really good use of, again, this idea of getting you used to a certain style through the whole book, and then getting hit with all of this blackness on a page. Here we go. So it really ends up jumping out at you throughout the reading, just as much of an impact as it has on the character too. So I thought that was really clever way to do it. Yeah, it's a really, really great read. I was really impressed, even as difficult as it was to read sometimes, because again, there's this real unease and uncomfortableness with these characters. And again, it's when you can start to be led down a path where you start to identify with these characters, even within their flaws. That's an interesting space to take you to, you know, where you can actually, you feel for that person, even though some of the stuff they're doing is horrible, you know. Yeah, he's quite a creator. I mean, I'm glad I kind of tried him out. And again, shout out to Colin for kind of encouraging me to check out more of his stuff, Loading the Cannon. Well worth checking out.
I really like the art.
Yeah, he's got a really nice style, and his page layouts are really well done. Mixing up the panels, mixing up the sizes of the panels, having some kind of moments where the dialogue, there's not much dialogue, and kind of just moving you through the page. Again, it's that really adds to that atmosphere. And honestly, in a thick volume like this, he's got so much time to play those things out even more, that he can really find his pacing in it, which is an amazing thing. Hello, Miss So.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, Terrence. The idea that as you're showing it, you've got the juxtaposition between like 3 or 4 panels on one page and then 15 on the other. And the idea of the characters not being comfortable, but you not finding like just a 6-panel grid on every page can be not that it's discomforting, but it's not you're not finding that rhythm. It's kind of a slow move to it.
Interesting.
That really stood out. That and those pages that were really sparsely inked, and then they would be juxtaposed with some of the other ones. I love when they do stuff like that.
Yeah. It's a good point about the panels. I never really thought about it, to be honest, that because you don't really find a rhythm, even though you end up reading it more like manga, there is a kind of speed that happens. There are moments where you kind of go fast and kind of slow down a bit, for sure. So yeah, that's a really good point. I never really thought about it like that.
All right, I'm out of here. I got my one good point today.
See you later, everybody. See you next week. What do you got next for us there, Matt?
Well, since we're on the topic of suicide or death.
Oh, come on. You don't have to pull it out.
No, it kind of fits in at this point now. So I thought I would talk about Acid Nun. And this is Corrine Halbert. She's out of, I don't know where she's originally from, but she's out of Chicago now. And this was, I think this is a Wheel and Sprocket book, or a Wheel and Sprocket, Silver Sprocket maybe. Yeah. But yeah, so this was 3 issues. This was originally created as a zine, a small one, probably just under a half of a regular comic book size. Let me get it open to some pages here. And so you open it up right away, and just the front, you're getting into the mystical stuff right away, which is nice. One of the things that stood out to me was the paper quality on this it's like it almost feels like construction paper from a kid.
Oh wow!
But look at that art and that coloring. It's just, she did such a great job with this. And this was it's like 120 pages. So I sat down and read it in one day. And you open with this Little Bones Lies, which if anybody has Vacuum Decay, I think it was issue 2 or 3. This actually shows up in there. It's a short story she did that she was doing for the novel. But this creature here is like, basically can't be satiated, like completely eats people up. And like basically totally takes them over, and they don't know why. And she's kind of fascinated. Like this girl down here, she actually wants to be eaten. Yeah. So as they're telling this story, so like here's, you can see her. She actually wants to be eaten.
Wow.
And in this one here, she says, "I can finally feel." And so this woman, this green woman, kind of eats up everybody. And so I went into this thinking, okay, it's called Acid Nun, so it's going to be horror. I've seen a lot of her artwork before. Real sexualized stuff, so definitely not for children by any means. And then we get, obviously, the nun lady shows up, and the nun lady shows up, and she shows up with, let's see if I can find the page. Yeah, she shows up with 10 hits of acid for each of them.
Oh.
And so they start taking acid, and this is where, like, I'm like, okay, this gets a little crazy. You get one guy here who's to start out to be the moderator or the narrator. He actually comes out and introduces himself as the narrator. And then at the next point, we get a different narrator, which is this weird black thing right here. And he becomes the narrator of the story. And it took me a while to figure out. It took me about half the book to figure it out. And then she hints on at the end of it. But basically what she's dealing with here is all these inner demons. And so she tells this story where the nun gives the lady, or she's the nun, I should say. And so she gets the 10 strips of acid and then goes on this trip. And it's this black narrator, that big, long, interesting being that's putting her down all the time, telling her that she isn't worthy to live. Find one of the things I really dug about this was how she colored the backgrounds on some of these pages. I'm trying to find out. Yeah, like these ones where she's got these, the background paper color is all colored.
Amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just really done. Really so beautiful. And when you look at the edges, you can see the colors on them. But this exploration then, so she goes into this acid trip and starts meeting all these freaky people. She finds herself as a little girl who's been held hostage, and she wants to she's got to go save her. And that little black narrator is basically her internal voice telling her she's not good enough, she should kill herself, she's unworthy, she's never going to amount to anything. And like I said, these were 3 issues that were collected, and at the end of each issue, when she started writing this back in maybe 2017, 2018, she writes a little 1-page letter to the editor type thing, just talking about the story. And she gets into her father. She didn't really know her father very well. Her father ended up killing herself. But I think if I remember right, or killing himself, if I remember right, she was told that he died of a heart attack and didn't find out until years later when she tried to kill herself at 15 years old. And somebody left her medical file out that her father actually died or actually committed suicide. She had no idea about that. And so this whole story is really about her, like, unpacking her life as far as these demons that she's been led to believe, and dealing with trauma and dealing with abandonment issues. And so this whole acid trip, and it's funny because then the green lady that was eating everything the whole time, she's on the acid trip, supposedly. She's just basically having sex with one of these gods, one of the goat gods. And that's like the whole time, like every time you turn the page and she's in one of them, they're basically having sex. But it was really interesting because it's this idea, like I expected it to be more of like a horror, sexualized fantasy type thing. And it turned into being this really deep tale of like her working with her emotions and dealing. She talks a little bit in those exposés about being in therapy and having to work through all this stuff. And she's basically like working it out in her head through the comic book medium. So there's one of those pages where she's got, this one's just text. It's like at the end of one of the issues, and she's giving her kind of her backstory. And I think it was really ballsy, really gutsy for her to go this deep into sharing like all the stuff that, look at this, all the stuff that went on in her life. Just those colors.
Yeah, it's a nice style, man.
Yeah, fill your own cup first, and then acceptance. So you can kind of get these themes. But it went really deep into just this idea of like, how does she come to terms with her father killing her and the abandonment issues and the loneliness and just processing. And she uses the comic book medium to do it. And it comes off really, really successful. At one point she's getting, while she's on the acid trip, these guys here, these guys at the skeleton mess are basically trying to grope her. They've kind of drugged her up and are trying to take advantage of her. And her friends, this is the one time that they aren't having sex. The green lady and the goat come in and help save her. But it turns out to be somewhat of a pretty uplifting story at the very end. And just, I was really surprised at how different it was than what I expected. Expectation-wise, like I said, it's expecting horror and really cool art and stuff like that. And then we get this just emotional story about her processing. everything she's dealt with in her life, and just telling, like, you know, it was all, like we were talking, Laura, like not having to believe those thoughts that show up. And I do a lot of meditation stuff. So working with thoughts and emotions, once I got into that, I was like, oh, this is perfect. I really liked hearing her write about this and the therapy that she was going through and how she learned not to believe all this crap that was coming up her head. And the fact that she made it a narrator and then put the whole twisted story into a drug trip, it really unpacks well. I was pleasantly surprised with what I got out of it.
Yeah, it's definitely.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying expectation from the cover. You can like straight away make up your mind to, like you say, you have. And then the first thing I was thinking Behemoth. I don't know why. It was just the first thing in my head because of the cover. So it's it's really good to see that color, especially, you know, like she went into that. But then an acid trip. I mean, yeah, you need those colors, I guess. I mean, I'm sorry, I haven't tried that. But, so I don't know really what's happening in your brain, but it's imagination of seeing what people saying usually.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I followed her on Instagram for quite a few years, and just seeing her style, like I never knew that was part of the story either. There's this real kind of iconography, and I thought it was a lot of reference to kind of old movies and horror tropes and that sort of thing. So I'm surprised to hear that, because I didn't expect there to be a story behind it. When she was promoting it, I just assumed it was a collection of her amazing illustrations, because her style is really, really cool. But I'm surprised that there's actually like a story going on in there. So that's very cool.
Yeah. And I was surprised at how deep it went. Like I said, the fact that she just laid it bare, that takes a lot of courage. Like a lot of writers never go to those places of really dark and deepness. She kind of lays it out on the line of what went on with her life. And I got a lot of respect just to have that courage to go out and do that. But that, like I said, the collection with that paper quality, you got that construction paper feel, and some of those pages have that full black background, and the other ones are all almost like a tie-dye-ish color. And you know, her art is just so gorgeous to look at in there.
Yeah, very cool. Well, that's great. And that just came out, right? That's like a very recent release, hey?
Yeah, she the 28th of September, so it just came out last month as the hardcover edition did. I know when they were at the small press expo, she had copies there, and people were walking around like, I didn't get mine yet, damn it. I was waiting for it to come in. So it's kind of like I said, I thought it was going to be more of like a Halloween style read, and then it turned into something even more. So I was just really happy with it.
Yeah, right on. Awesome.
Very cool.
Rasa, what do you got?
Okay. That's 12 and something I've been hearing about most of the time. And I know the creator, the Mage.
Oh, hey, nice.
Matt Wagner stuff. So I heard YouTube people like this Mage story with Matt Wagner's, the previous things. I've never experienced it prior to that. And it's actually the thing what put the Matt Wagner on the scope for people's eyes, isn't it? It's what at the back of this book saying. I think it seems to be that Image reprinted it is in 3 volumes. I only read volume 1, which I found in the library once again. And then, so I judged it once again. Like, the first thing, great. I mean, it looks very nice for the comic style, but there was like, first thing, Black Adam, because Black Adam is everywhere now. So I guess I watched it, you know, that lightning. It's like, okay, maybe he was trying like having that, but then, and the art style. I mean, I don't know how it was originally. Is if his art, because then reprints kind of represents the art quite differently. So I don't know how it went in the single comic books and how it was, but art style was like, okay, so I have to put my brain back into, because my brain was overthinking once again, and I was saying like, no, put it, you know, like just let it slide and see how the story will prevail and how everything, if it's going to be interesting or not. And honestly, I was sucked in straight away. It's the way they introduced the character vaguely. So he's walking down the street singing, and then he's like almost like a hobo guy sits next to him. He's probably had a couple of drinks, starts having this conversation, and basically unravels through the story from that point onwards, because of course he's gonna show his magic part. So, and he's like, what the hell is going on? And it's beautiful the way they put this the panel. So it's very you can feel definitely Wagner's the beginning life of a comic book creating, because there's lots of things you can pick on, but the story itself was fast moving, intriguing, with this crazy looking dude with the elbow, where this elbow is basically can kill. or maybe damage our main character, who doesn't have a clue who he is. It seems to be that he's been living in the shadow. Somebody took his memory away, and basically he's extra, like he's well, not superhero, but he's he has powers, and he's like while this confrontation happens, he just realizes what's happening to me, like I can really beat this guy to the pulp. And a lots of great paneling and the expressions, and he's this elbow, which is great. I kind of have like a crazy elbow as well, maybe done as well. But anyway, so far as I say, the story goes like he doesn't have a clue that he has these powers. He goes have a conversation on the phone saying this accident happened and blah blah blah, and basically escapes and goes in. And then of course straight away you get, which is really well done, you get a bad guy in the background. You can't see him, who don't understand. I didn't understand exactly what's happening behind the scenes, but that's how it started to intrigue me and wanted me to turn the pages. So this annoying douche supposed to be helping, but he was way annoying, and he was annoying me in the same time. It's like, what the hell? How do you talk like that? But basically, he's the one who's basically telling him and helping him coming through or understanding what he's gonna be. And it evolves great. Action, like I say, it's action scenes. It's very kind of 90s. It screams 90s to me. Like, conversations, understanding, denial, all that kind of sort of things, and the story in the background where there's a lots of things what this guy doesn't understand, and other characters who comes in to help, and they have the secret to tell, and nobody's like shush him, like everybody gets shushed because nobody's supposed to tell him who he actually is. And I think he's going into realm of like a Excalibur type of a thing. Other lines and stuff. So really good and absolutely entertaining. And the artwork won me over straight after that. I got really quickly used to it. The beginning, I didn't like that, as I said to you, like, the like when you see human being, especially drawn in this kind of fashion, my eye starts telling me like maybe you could just touch up a little bit more and blah blah blah. It just makes it. I guess that's how you do if you. I mean, you've been reading somebody else's work, you kind of like see how you can. I don't think I want saying that I want them improved, but just the way my head was processing the panels I was absorbing. But as I say, very completely entertaining. I'm definitely going to look out for second volume because it's just intrigued me even more. Like, this guy is dead, and he doesn't look dead, like, and he's saying to them, I'm like, but why, like, what's going on here? But so like, do you remember yesterday? And he's like, and you like look completely baffled. He's like, no, I don't, because you did. And then he tries to explain, but like, I've been somewhere, and he's like a workaholic before he's like a lawyer and stuff like that. And they keep on trying to explain to him, like, dude, you actually dead? And he's like, okay, all right, okay, if I am dead, I'm gonna come and help you, kind of thing. So they basically band together to basically help against this evil guy who has the shadow abilities, and he's taking the demons from other realm where originally our main characters actually come from. It's really as entertaining, and as I say, it makes you just want to read more, because it's kind of have that storyline, and this bad girl who's basically enchanted him quite quickly, and he didn't understand what's happening to him, and if they didn't intervene, his friends, he would be basically dead. So a lot of things happening, and a lot of things he's learning about, and just those little things, and it's really good. I have the whole complete Grendel from Mark Wagner, so I actually am well aware of the creator himself. I like the mystery of the Grendel, especially the rose part was my kick, which I really enjoyed a lot. So I was well aware that people were talking about Mage prior to that, but I didn't even know how they look like. I didn't know, nothing about it. And then I saw on the bookshelf. It's like, okay, cool, they have it. So
doesn't Madman have the same kind of lightning bolt on his front as well too? Mike Allred's Madman. Is there something similar there too?
Yes, yeah. If you those beautiful library edition, isn't it? Dark Horse came out with this massive white backgrounds and stuff like that. There's another thing I would like to explore, but this is I found this library. It's really good. You know, like if I don't know if I would have been as entertained if I would purchased first, because it's a mental part of myself. Like I'm really not saying because I basically unravel everything in my own head. You know, like I'm the worst enemy of my own kind of thing. So I need to basically let it loose and just let it go and just completely enjoy what I'm reading. Shazam, yeah, as I said, like Black Adam. This is basically to me. And stop looking, like stop. No, this is going down. Right? So anyway, so it's intriguing, as I say, and because of they have, knights probably and Excalibur stuff, and that's of course as an entertaining business. If you're well aware, all are well aware of Excalibur and kind of that kind of tale. So we'll see how it goes, but really good to read, a very fast read as well, and quite wordy at the times. Like he was going into like, oh, it's really wordy, but I was just breezing through this and I wanted to know more. So it's really good, to be honest, for a book, something like that, where you kind of judge from the beginning, and it's like, nah, but, like that's the thing. My brain sometimes just like, you're not gonna enjoy this. It's like, right?
Yeah.
I'm just like, and then, oh, this is really good, and almost having this conversation, but maybe it's just like a little bit crazy in my head, but it's just where I process different languages, especially like English is not my first, so I guess that's why I'm critiquing it in the same like harsh way as well. But there's a Sam Keith quality to some of that art in there as well too. Some of the coloring, especially. Because that's why it's like reminds me of all that era, like where my husband would be going crazy for, like when he was reading the comic books, especially because in the 90s he was absolutely enthralled in comic books, whereas myself, Donald Duck.
Yeah.
Does he do the same thing in Grendel? It looked like in that book, like a lot of the backgrounds were basically kind of like washes or just no detail in the background, which forces you to kind of focus on the characters.
I haven't looked through the Grendel in a really long time. I know it's like lots of. I think it's like I always recall it's only black and white, to be honest. But because they're using that red as a moment, like the rose thing. That's why it's so in my eyes. So when I picture the Grendel, I only know the rose thingy and the rose or Grendel. It's just association for me to that. But I honestly haven't looked at, to be honest, I tell you, I actually would be interesting now to see after reading this material back to Grendel, see what the improvement was. There would be a quite good comparison to be honest. So.
Yeah, I thought that the original Mage stuff was black and white too, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Oh, there you go. Maybe the color. But as I say, this is Image Comic Books produced this, reprinted it. It's when is when they actually produced it? Give me the year. 2017. So it's recent. So it's but isn't it Grendel something happening with Matt Wagner?
Yeah, Grendel's getting it made into a show, isn't it? I thought that was the thing that was happening. Yeah. Yeah.
So, and my husband likes Grendel, so that's why when I was starting to pick up, he was influencing me to get that.
Yeah,
so I was getting it, and of course,
cool.
Intrigued much more.
Yeah, no, very cool.
Yeah.
What do I got? A quick one.
Oh.
I found this yesterday. There was an antiques and collectibles show, which always scares me. Antiques. The word antiques show means that everything is going to be priced ridiculous. But it took place at the racetrack. We've got a horse track. I don't know, about a 15-minute drive from us, Assiniboine down. So in the main room, they had this collectibles sale, and there was somebody selling comics that I've never seen before. Saw some of the comic addicts, the local guys here at the table. It's like, okay, so I got to get in there. And because they know me, as soon as I got there, Terrence, you want to check out that box at the end, go to that. That's going to have your stuff in. So when I went to that one of the things I found was ZAM, which is a Zap Comics Jam Comic, a mini book. So it's a bunch of the artists from Zap. They were just doing these jam comics where they were working on stuff together. So like right out of the gate, you get Robert Crumb and Victor Moscoso doing a little comic strip together. It's all very kind of abstract stories. They're sort of even more stream of consciousness than their usual Zap Comics type of thing. So it's more about, it's cool to see these artists working together on the page. Robert Williams and S. Clay Wilson doing a story together. And it's great. I just watched a documentary on YouTube about Robert Williams. And this, to me, this type of lettering, this look, this sort of metallic look that he was able to give things, that just screams Robert Williams lettering to me. So again, just a silly little story. This bunch of broccoli getting some mail, sort of getting spam, but it's all of this. It's advertisements for sex toys and sex dolls, and of course the S. Clay Wilson character who lives with them is all about that. So he gets the catalog, and he ends up ordering a bunch of stuff for himself as the broccoli goes to the cops in the post office, where we get a little checkered demon action in there. So there's a box that ends up coming for Broccoli's roommate. And of course it's smut, it's dirty movies, and he ends up getting a real kick out of it. And Broccoli finally gives in and orders some things. Of course he gets a big dildo. And this is, and the fun stuff about these books is when you get into this, I mean, because Robert Williams has this tendency to get really abstract with some of his imagery, and S. Clay Wilson as well. So you start blending these artists and you get these pages that are just filthy as all hell, but also super abstract with these forms and figures that you can't quite figure out what the hell you're looking at, even though you know it's filthy as shit. And this one has a nice happy ending. So instead of our suicide, we get a nice happy ending. They end up realizing that they love the same things and end up kind of hanging out together and watching these dirty movies. So, I mean, it's a bunch of stupid shit like that, but it was a really, I've never seen this book around. I've never seen it out in the wild. It's always something I've seen online. And this guy had a 50% sale off of everything. So I ended up getting this for a really, really good price. So we get some Wonder Warthog as well, too. This was a really funny one as well, actually. He's talking about time travel and traveling to different worlds in the universe. And because he can move almost at the speed of light, he ends up going to take this trip and coming back to this talk that he was a part of with a skeleton from another planet to kind of prove his theories. Time travel ends up working differently on Earth. So, of course, when he comes back, it's the future. And it turns out he owes them storage fees because they have a record of him entering the talk but not leaving it. So that's the amount of money that he ends up owing. So we get a nice, the moral of the story is never sign your name to anything, which I got a kick out of after talking about all this time travel and this sort of thing. So a fun book. Spain Rodriguez doing some stuff as well too. That's always a hit. There seemed to be this era with Undergrounds where they were doing these mini books. Crumb did Snatch. Crumb also had that Comics and Stories. This one, there's a couple of things that were sort of this size. There was a Basil Wolverton one that was put out as well too. So, and again, it's just not stuff that I find and never thought I'd actually have a copy. I think they might have done a reproduction for the Zap box set, but some really, you know what you're getting when you're looking at the Zap crew. So, and then kind of our last end page there inside. So yeah, cool looking stuff. So that was a fun, smutty book. Nobody committed suicide. Nobody was depressed. We've lost Matt, but
I'm here.
I must have driven him away. Oh, your camera's down, Matt. We can hear you, but your camera's down.
Yeah, I can remedy that. Give me 1 second.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I went to grab something.
Yeah, a really nice find. A good little score.
The artwork is splendid.
Yeah,
actually.
it's really fun. Sorry, go ahead.
No, it's just it's always show those many little books you find, like little gems, and the art is like just spot on in every page, and it's just like, how the hell, man?
Yeah.
What because I think it's just specific era. I think when there is some certain time, there was so much good coming out of that, and like you say, you have to go look for it, to be honest, because I never find those obscure little.
I was really surprised to see it in that box, to be honest. As I was flipping through, there was a lot of really good stuff. He had quite a lot of stuff that was really overpriced, even with 50% off, but there was a few gems. I didn't end up picking up a lot, but I did get a small stack of stuff, which was great. I never expected to see that in that box, though.
The guy probably well aware that this is kind of like really rare to find them in anywhere.
It's weird because some of the stuff, it feels like, it's the classic. There was one comic in there that didn't have a price on it, for example, and it was a dollar bin book, 100% a dollar bin book. So I asked him, and he said, "Oh no, that one's that's $6. So 50% off of that, it's like, yeah, that goes back in the box." So he had this with some of these comic guys. There's this weird. They don't quite understand. They price some things that's like, wow, that one should have been priced at a lot more. But then there's stuff that it's 50 or 50 cents or $1 books, and they have them priced at $8 and $10. It's like I can't quite figure out some of these dealers with their pricing on things.
The minute I see no price on things, it turns me down. Like I don't want, because I know it's going to be an engagement in conversation. It's like, oh, so how much is it? And it's usually like, no, you already have an expectations. Like if you don't price them, I would always think it should be quite cheap, because you don't even care to put this like a price tag on it. And then they turn around and sell you like, oh fuck, no, this is like 20. It's like, what the?
Yeah.
I don't, what? So you don't. One time I got super stuff. So I went to comic book that market I used to went. So this guy has this comic book. It's not in a great condition. Something DC, I don't remember anyway. So it doesn't have price tag. So for shit, it's not going to be much. So I asked him how much is it. Oh, and then he's like, almost like, oh yeah, this is like the most expensive. Like,
yeah.
You didn't have time to put the stamp on your book, and you tell me now this is really expensive, and you like look at me now. Whatever, and you took away the book from me, and I just like, I was like, fuck this. You already know it's gonna be something, because I hate that, like.
Yeah, no, it's a bit annoying. When he told me the price, I was literally still looking at him, and I opened up the box and dropped it right back in the box. Thank you very much. Good to know. I'll be passing on that one if it's $6. Thank you.
That's the thing. I think sometimes they just don't realize, like people. It's specifically like those comic books where there's nothing about them really screams like you should pay that lots of money for, and there's a niche market for it.
Yeah. But there's so much fear with sellers, and I mean, I felt it too when I've sold comics. I've totally felt it. There's this fear of like, I don't know what I have, and I need to get the most out of it. So I put that priced at $4, and it sold really quick. Oh shit. Oh my God. Did you see how excited they were? Oh my, so I can feel that trap. I know that these guys are going through that stuff. Like they just want to get kind of what is fair for their books. And I totally understand that, but it's one of those things. If it's not got a price on it, that's $1 book, my friend. Cause that's what I was expecting him to say. Oh, if it doesn't have a price, all the ones without prices are $1. We just didn't want to put a $1 price tag on a bunch of stuff. But so, I mean, I can totally feel him, especially with there was 3 of us sitting at that booth from kind of the local comic addicts group, and we're kind of chatting or whatever and pulling out books. And so I'm sure that was also playing in his mind, like, oh, these guys know what they're looking for. Oh my God, these guys are going to rob us blind, because when it didn't have a price tag on it, he actually blamed it. He's like, oh, someone must have peeled the price tag off. It's like, yeah, sure. Someone peeled the price tag off. Yeah. That's exactly what they did for your shitty little comics here.
Excuses, like, But yeah, I understand that. I mean, it even happened to me while I was selling something on eBay. So you put it in, and you never have a great expectations. You just put the random numbers in, and you sell like that, like in instant, and you're like, what the fuck did I do? What? Like stupid. I mean, so of course you're gonna have to just fucking give it away.
Yeah.
But the real eBay is like, oh fuck, okay, £1 extra. It's like. £1 extra, maybe I could have, and you start making this bullshit in your head. You're like, okay, just go, let go. You already did it.
But just to go back to what you said before about that Zam, like the joy that you see on the page, that's part of the fun of it too. Like these are guys that are just clearly, I can picture them all sitting in a room together, passing pages around and just laughing and getting high and drinking or whatever the hell they're doing, and just having an absolute blast, like putting together these pages together and just kind of hanging out with each other. It's it's a nice kind of artifact of that era, because you're totally right. It's that era for sure. There was a different kind of, and especially within the underground stuff, that fun really comes across the page. Like you can see these guys are just fucking around and just having a blast drawing these bizarre pictures and giggling like school kids, passing it back and forth, right? So
the thing is, it stands out really nicely of the line work. You know when it's like, especially when you do it black and white. The black and white pull off is not very easy, especially if you just contain a little bit piece of paper. But you know the skill already, and like easiness, you know, like that's when it stands out, the art for me, from people when they draw and stuff like that.
What were you going to say there, Matt?
Well, I was going to say, yeah, it's interesting when you're talking about that, because I can picture that scene, you know, a bunch of different couches or chairs and those guys passing the pages around. And I was just thinking, like, how does that work today, like digitally? You email somebody the file that's sitting next to you and say, here, now you work on it. There's just not that same collaboration, that physical touching and passing and being part of that. It seems like with digital, with what we've gone, we're missed that now to a certain point.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's a certain energy that comes from, you know, like in all my years of playing music, I played in a lot of groups where it was purely improvisational. So you're in a room and you're making up shit on the spot. I did that when everything went digital as well, but it was the same kind of thing. It's different. Making files of music to send to somebody to manipulate is like, but we're not in the same headspace. We're not sharing a room together. We're not telling stories. We're not kind of feeding off it in the moment. It really does kind of, I mean, it can still work, don't get me wrong, but it really changes that dynamic as opposed to like being in a physical space with somebody, you know, like, and feeding off of that energy or whatever you want to call it. Right. So, yeah.
Was there more of those Zams put out, or was that the only?
No, I think that was the only one. And like I said, I'm pretty sure they did a reproduction for the Zap box set. I'm trying to remember because I watched Earl Grey's video so long ago now where he's talking about it. I think they did a recreation, but as far as I know, that was the only one that they did. And I think there was 2 printings of it. This one has the 60-cent price tag on it, but normally I think the first printing has like a 50-cent price on it or something. So cool.
It's like an Ashcan kind of edition, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, the small size.
So nice and tiny.
What year are we talking about now? Just to make me in the right place.
I think this was like 71, something like that. I have a feeling because I was looking through the Fogel's price guide just to get an idea. Well, no, actually, the dates on them are 74. I'm seeing for signatures and stuff. So 1974.
Okay.
So well into Zap's run at that point, because I think the first one was what, like 69 or 70 or something like that, right? So they were well into the rhythm with their Zap comics.
Okay, cool. All right.
Matt, what do you got?
All right. Well, I thought I'd grab. I bumped my camera before, that's why it's off. But I was gonna, because you were talking about the smaller books. So this one, the one I'm going to talk about here, if I can get it. This is to trees, so you can kind of see it's a little bit smaller than your normal trade paperback here. We'll talk about the re-up, but I did want to show off for how small this one was. One of the like, I still love this size. See how tiny these guys are, but yeah, I've still got a bunch of different small ones that I've collected over the years. So yeah, I enjoy a awkward size comic. I think they're really interesting.
Very cool.
I've got one that's, before I jump into that, I got one that's, you remember the old dot matrix paper where it's got the tracks on the side that you would peel off?
Yeah.
So he printed, his comic is printed on that. I'm gonna have to do an overview of it at some point. And then he folded them the long way. So the comic's only about that wide and like that high. And then as you read it, you're open this way, but it's the old dot matrix paper. So
that's amazing.
Yeah, it's the same guy who did this. At some point I'll do a overhead video of it because I love his stuff. His artwork is great. But,
yeah. Cool.
Now somebody younger is like, what is dot matrix paper?
Exactly. Yeah. But I thought I'd talk about the re-up. This will be the one I will. This is Chad. I'm probably gonna butcher the name. Bilyeu, Bilyeu. I'm gonna butcher the name, but he did. He's done a comic series that's, I believe it's still going, called Chad in Amsterdam. And this is one of those that I was kind of talking about. Where Terrence and I were talking a little bit about the idea of. You read a bunch of different people who are doing the same thing, and then some of them stand out. And this was one of them for me. So this is all about the re-up of marijuana. And so it's about his days. It's these diary times. He's working part-time at Georgetown University at night in the audiovisual department. and then he's taking a couple of classes at night, and he ends up getting in a situation where he hooks a buddy up. Trying to get some art with he hooks a buddy up, somebody who deals weed, and the whole story basically, there's a lot of these chunks of text. There you go. These chunks of text mixed in. So it's this diary kind of story of his time in Georgetown. And this is the first issue. I was messaging with him on Twitter. He's actually working on issue 2 right now. And it does leave off in the cliffhanger spot. But this is one of his buddies that he met that was in DC, but not in the suburbs, that had basically a complete connection all the time for weed. And so they actually go through like how they meet in the parking lot, how a transaction goes down. And it's interesting to hear the different, like, oh, do you want some stuff for yourself or do you want weight? And so weight is their reference, if you want like, a couple of ounces because you're going to end up selling it versus just using your own stash. I've never heard it called weight before, so that kind of stood out to me. But yeah, so then the whole thing is there's a couple times where the guy that he hooks up kind of takes over, and he says, I'm not a kingpin, but he's like a mid-level guy in the marijuana business here. And the guy ends up being at Georgetown, leaving school, going to what he calls reality. And so then Chad, our main guy here, they keep offering him the job, the mid-level job. Man, you got to take it. And it opens up with a white guy on the couch saying, it's going to be you, or it's going to be some white kid from the suburbs taking everybody's money from Georgetown. And so the whole story is really about him then kind of like deciding like, oh, do I want this? Do I want this hassle? I don't want this hassle. He keeps turning it down. And at the end, the last page is, yeah, I'll do it. And he's got this really great photo of a bunch of different buds and then actually what the grams weigh out to when they talk about an eighth or a quarter.
Right.
It's got the nice, see if I can get, nice wraparound cover with the buds on there and stuff.
Very nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just kind of like one of these where it was like like the diary comic, but it actually worked really well for me. I actually really enjoyed it. I'm excited to see what the next one's going to entail from it. But it's a little 30-page small comic where it's mainly kind of his time in Georgetown, learning about being in the drug trade, going and smoking, how these guys met each other, how they built a relationship up, and then just moving marijuana. So I'm really nice. He gets into like the idea of like, and then like 5 years later they decriminalized it. You could carry up to 28 grams and there wasn't a felony there wasn't a charge unless you sold it. And he's like, all that would have been easy for me then, but that wasn't the way it was at the time that I was dealing. And so he gets into it. So I think it's going to be kind of an interesting series. I'm really looking forward to the next one coming out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm wondering, like, with that in mind, if he's going to kind of follow through to kind of modern day and what it means to be a dealer now when, a lot of places it's legal. There's Box Brown is doing an online thing I see on Twitter, or sorry, not on Twitter, on Instagram, where he's talking about legalization of marijuana. And one of his recent strips was people still going to their dealer that they've always used, even though it's legal and there's dispensaries and all these kind of things. Like this idea of they still go to that guy so they can hang out in his place and play video games and end up talking for a little bit just to get, your dope from them kind of thing. So it's an interesting kind of that balance of decriminalization versus still wanting to go to the guy down the road and hang out. So that sounds pretty good, actually. I'll have to check it out. Well, and then Rick Ray is talking about Chad in Amsterdam is really great, worth checking out.
Yeah, and that's a hard one. I think this one is actually published by the same people who did that. I think it's from the Netherlands.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, it's from the Netherlands as well. And Chad in Amsterdam is his time. It's kind of and this got me turned on. Like when I got done with that, I'm like, well, that was written well enough and it was drawn well enough that I'm curious about Chad in Amsterdam, but I couldn't find the first issue. I think the first couple issues are probably sold out already because it's been out for a while. I think it's been going on for a decade or something like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Go into a Bistro Books. I just went on the website. He has the whole collection to buy.
Oh, he does?
Bistro Books. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Okay.
Bistro Book.
Yeah, Bistro's the one who publishes it. So, okay, they have all of Chad in Amsterdam out there. Okay.
I just looked it up. I mean, while you were talking, so everybody's talking Chad, and I was like, what is this all about? So I'm asking, okay?
Russ is our researcher, our live researcher.
And it's funny because the first time I'd seen his name was from Chad in Amsterdam. And then I looked at it and I was like reading it. I'm like, the last thing I want is another, the diary side. Like, I've read so much of that, and they're hard
Yeah.
to find. And then you read something good that he does in that same format. I'm like,
And it's
okay,
gone.
maybe I do need to go and revisit that one. Yeah,
Right,
so,
right.
Hmm. Well, if you visit UK, make sure you don't pick up any of your baggies of marijuana
Yeah.
because no good. Not in this
Yeah.
part of
Nothing's legal. Nothing's legal over there, huh?
yeah. The minute you could get yeah. But I mean, they are a bit like if you carry but don't sell, then it's okay. But there's a certain amount of as well. But yeah, no, you have
Honestly,
to hide.
That's so
it's
interesting.
so nice. It's so nice going to like the place we've got. So one of the jokes recently was that apparently now in Winnipeg, there's more dispensaries than there are Tim Hortons coffee shops, which is kind of a classic Canadian joke. But it's so nice going to those places, especially for a guy like me. Like I can find it online. I can find exactly what I want. I go down. I get it. I know what I'm getting. I know the strength. I know it's not going to fuck me up too badly. You know what I mean? So it's such a nice. I'm so glad that we went this direction. I'm so glad that I've seen it in my lifetime that it's kind of come to this point. It's just, it doesn't make sense to me for it to be illegal. I just don't understand. I've never understood it, but yeah.
Well,
Yeah, and I'm surprised England's that way because I think they're the world leader in testing out mushrooms or psilocybin for depression and other things. I think they're like the farthest ahead. So they've got those real loose laws around that, but then stricter around marijuana, which is interesting.
Right.
Yeah, I still know. I think there's lots of talk about it. We're still gonna talk, but they keep on bring up on the news saying like, oh, this caught with this giant factory of producing marijuana. It's like massive. There was like a hectare, or like some absolutely ridiculous amount of field, and all covered, like proper cover, like real like underground. But somebody, somebody shifted, somebody spilled the beans while they were buying.
I picture Cheech up there with the tarp and pretending like he's swimming to get the hole in the tarp.
I could not believe that things like that exist, but then the lengths what people goes in order to, I mean, it's like ridiculous. Like almost in my country, in Lithuania as well, it's like no, they're very kind of like they take the religious spin way too much and political spin, and then everything just goes like, no, you can't even talk about it. Let's say this way, but people go into lengths to get to the point of getting that stuff. It's like ridiculous. There's one dude. He basically makes what does he makes? It's like he works for like carpentry. So he manages put like this compartment in the wood, like in the planks of wood, where you basically put in like in the house. I presume and that's like you basically you buy a like 8 or 6 or 7 whatever in this bunch of wood, and inside there's this like little compartment with like basically marijuana everywhere. It's like hidden. And it's just,
that's hilarious.
Come up with, but we get caught, unfortunately.
Wow. I remember as a teenager, I had a thick dictionary where I had hollowed out some of the pages to stash my hash and my pipes and everything, so I could close it up and put it on my shelf at my desk.
Yeah, the most I remember my friends always the Bible.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
it's like almost like to the Bible kind of thing. So
that's hilarious.
That whole political thing. Yeah, I've frequently thought back on. I was born in the 70s, but mainly grew up in the 80s. And just thinking back to like the Reagans in America, the war on drugs, and showing the cracked egg and, well, this is your brain on drugs, and how much of it was directed towards marijuana. And then I remember when I had smoking for the first time, it was like, well, if they told me all this stuff about weed and I'm not having that experience, what about all the other drugs that they haven't talked about yet? And that's what actually allowed me to go down the other road. I'm like, you lied to me about this one, so I'm sure you lied to me about all the others.
Yeah.
So I frequently think back, like, I blame the Reagans for my drug use.
Because of Reagan that I tried heroin, you fucking asshole.
That's why it's everything like that. When you grow up, it's like everybody tells you it's one thing, and you always think there's something behind it. Like you always there's this conspiracy you want to unravel. Somehow there's always something behind that. Yeah, it's funny.
So what we're saying here is everybody get high. Don't worry about it. Just go get high. Don't even sweat it.
I've never heard about it. I don't know what this guy's talking about.
Yeah.
I don't know.
What do you got for us next? Something drug related, I hope.
Unfortunately, I don't have anything like that. But the star of the show.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
So this is once again heard about it. I know them like really well. Read some stuff. Never got into as much as I did to this. So I think this is one of the best and ever, like whatever he has created, and one of the first things he created. That's what he's famous for, from the beginning. And so of course you read something after that, and like art style and everything. I've never like it. It never gelled with me quite well because it's kind of scrappy in a way, but it's the mood he's setting in this and the way it's represented. It just works. And of course, to my surprise, there was an introduction by Darwin Cook. And I'm a fan of Darwin Cook, so maybe that really helped. Him talking about stuff and how like what the scene came into Canada in the 90s, and Scott Pilgrim is mentioning many people and the way he's introducing to this. So I was in absolutely great space of mind when I was reading it, and I think I highly recommend if you coming to something like this kind of like collected edition of one person's work. I ate it up like you were eating up that other book, Terence. This was, I did not want to put it down. I just like, so it's once again a story like it's a bit heartfelt story, like the life of the kid, but it's how he unravels it and how the story in this is Essex County, how all of the characters who were involved in the storytelling were like really rounded up so well. And I think that's what Darwin Cook was talking about as well, how he managed to like execute the story to this kind of like it's really easy to get into, really easy to kind of be all the characters become very endearing. You have a really sad story right from the beginning, where this boy Lester, who is living with his uncle because his mom died from cancer, and it's not easy to digest that right from the get-go. Like he's a bit weird, like he likes his comic books, lives in this village. He goes like once in a blue moon, his uncle goes to fill up his truck into this petrol station, and then you see another character and you're not aware of him whatsoever. Why he's introduced in here. So that's the thing. He doesn't give you much expectations whatsoever to understand what's happening in here. But if you're just continuously going, the storyline is just unravels in such a way where everything gets to explained for you. And in a way, it was an integral part because I just loved it the way what you from the beginning you read and what to the end you get after that. Mm-hmm. And of course, as myself, not really aware why you guys so fascinated about your hockey sport. I mean, my country we have like hockey, like sports clubs and all that stuff. Because we were invaded by Russia, so Russia likes hockey as well a lot, and they're very famous for that. But I never got in that sport because it's cold, man. I never. You slip and you like, I tried those skating or attempted at least. The first thing I did, I almost bloody broke my nose. I didn't, thankfully, but that just eliminated me interest in hockey. Just a little life story for me. But yeah, it's just a very integral part of this storytelling as well. How that sport and the lifestyle, how at least the idea of the Canadians suburban life, I guess you would say. But honestly, so enjoyable. It's I don't know how to explain this interaction between him and this guy who I forgot his name now. Hey Chief. So I don't remember his name now. But the way they talk and why they like, he's become kind of weirdo. Like, you're a child, grown-up man comes, like startles you, and you like step back and see like, why is he there? And he's not really okay in his head because had a really good chance of becoming a superstar at NFL. And he was playing in there, and then he had this crazy accident. Well, not accident, actually was in the field of play. He smashed his head, and he's basically not really all right after that. Like he really didn't recover in his life as a hockey player, basically completely trumped to bits, and he had to basically find other ways of dealing with his own life. and then you understand why this interaction happens, and it doesn't tell you straight away, which is really good, because he basically lets his characters tell you the story, and you flow with that, and it's like in parts of the seasons or of year. And it's more basically this Leslie story is the main part. It's a really big chunk of it, and then you go to this really sad, absolutely crazy. I think this is one thing when you age, and that's the one thing you don't want to be. And I think what we realize sometimes when you age is that life becomes quite lonely. And yeah, I honestly, I'm flipping through it, but I'm trying to find the page, but it just goes to another characters, and they keep on introducing them, and basically it's kind of like, so goes into people's life, because they will be very integral part of our main character from the beginning of the storyline. Maybe do like exactly justice to the storyline, but it's absolutely worth everybody's time. It's really easy to read. It doesn't have lots of words like going through. You just it tells the story itself by this art, and I really like this art in here.
Looks really great.
Yeah, it absolutely works with everything. It's emotional part of every character. It just lends to it. Like this guy is like his brother. Again, a fan of hockey, wanted to make a life of himself being a hockey player. He didn't succeed because he got injury, but his brother was more famous one, but he wasn't interested in. It's really, really good. And as I say, how it ended, and then he went really back into great grandmother's life, where he was in 1800 something like that, where she's like a part of the orphanage, not 1800. I'm talking 1920s or something like that. She's orphanage in the middle of the woods, and down, people dying, they have to survive, and that's really so sad. Like he picks moments really well, how he's going to introduce and why these characters are there to tell the storyline. I can't praise enough. I was so glad after reading this. It was like sad but really happy, I know why people were praising it so much, and I understand it now after reading it. And I don't know, I noticed it was like, wasn't it produced in single format as well? Yes, I presume. Or is it?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I thought it was written as a collection, but maybe I'm wrong about that.
Yeah, it's like because it has some extra stories. Like in here, there's an extra story where he's saying that was sampler of what kind of characters. This is like a beginning, how the character was supposed to be, but then he made him chunkier, bigger, more, like scarier looking stuff. Like his wife making a statue for him out of a main character, which is absolutely fantastic.
That's really great.
He says the sculpture, and she's a doll maker, and she made this action figure in the Christmas of 2007, and this is the most prized possession he has in his life. So it's just kind of little like things, but honestly, absolutely fantastic way of storytelling. And I don't know, it's just when somebody has an idea and you just completely does from the beginning to the end, and you just cannot be more than satisfied to having this. Like I probably, if I ever wanted to recommend anything and you ever want to try Jeff Lemire, go this. Don't go anywhere newer. Don't go into his DC work. Don't go anywhere there. Just take this one. You understand exactly what this guy is all about. Even his artwork just made me more appreciate what he was after that. Because when you get the great story with emotions, happiness, loneliness, thought process, and all that stuff, it just makes it different to understand what creator is all about. So yeah, I have a different appreciation for him now. Before I was judgmental, I was like, oh, what is this all about? He used to use watercolors, and I actually liked it that much, or in the color line scheme and stuff like that. But this has just opened up my eyes a bit more, and then understanding why everybody's praising him and why he won so many things after this, because it's really good read. And this like chunky collected edition my library had, it's just a little bit smaller than your comic book, but honestly, I was surprised because so many pages, like Jesus, am I going to, like the first thing you say, like, woof, this is going to be like a read through and a half. But it like what, 500 pages? Yeah, 512 pages. But I breezed, like I was like, oh, and like, you know, that feeling is the best when you like you read and you're like, oh, you want more kind of thing. So that's one of the things I always look forward to when I'm reading comic books. It's a rare thing, and especially about one person in particular, and especially
it's such a good feeling to have like an actual satisfying read. Hey, like even as you're talking about it, I think of books that I've read, like graphic novels that I've read, where you have that feeling of like, man, I was immersed in that world. I know these characters. That was so satisfying. It gave me everything that was presented, you know, like, I mean, and for the mainstream stuff, I would say Sweet Tooth, like read Sweet Tooth. I thought that was a phenomenal read. I haven't read Essex, but I'm gonna for sure. That'll be one that I pick up for sure.
That's the thing with Sweet Tooth. I have read this first volume of Sweet Tooth, and I kind of let go. Yeah. Because I lost it because I was so busy with everything reading. This does not let go, because I think it's the way he rounds the story up. It lets you kind of, in a way, I don't know if it's rewarding, but it is a reward for you as you're going through the story of these characters, and suddenly you understand every single integral. It's just like a flower, petals just blooms up, and you're like, oh wow, yeah, exactly why. That's why that emotion was so weird between two of them. The characters and interactions, they're understanding how this mother died, and you're like, it's just like it. I don't know, it just really, really works together. And as I say, I'm a big fan now because I wasn't. That I would be like this, you know, like talking about this book in such a way. I don't usually keep some praise of one person's work, but this is just, it's really rewarding as a read.
Yeah, Lemire's got this interesting ability where, like with Essex County, Royal City, even the beginning of Black Hammer, Sweet Tooth, he tells kind of the same story as far as this melancholy story wrapped in emotions between these characters. And it's not that it's a trope, but like he kind of can tell the same feeling to the story in multiple ones, and it works in multiple ones. Like I don't get sick of that, where like I talked earlier about the diary type things. With Lemire, he seems to really be able to peg that emotional intensity between characters. And yeah, if you haven't read Royal City, that's another one that I really like. He does his own artwork there. I think it's watercolor as well. But Essex County was great. It was probably 4 or 5 years ago that I read it, but I had the same thing. Looks like a chunky book, and you end up breezing through it. That you get to the end and you're like, it was really satisfying, but I kind of want to just start over and read it again.
Yeah. Well, I really liked as well. He used those clippings of the newspaper and telling also the storyline, not only from his own point of view, but like, let's say from the media's point of view to those two brothers and how their story came out and who is the dad. Or it's just, there's so many elements of it. And then how we understand why with the guy who I forget the name now of, but how integral part of his storyline and how the young kid's life was going through that kind of motions, and the uncle's grudge behind it as well. It's just like, it just unravels so well, and you understand completely. And then that old guy's storyline is just like, oh my God, please don't let me, I don't want to be. He's like losing his mind, and he's like, he remembers, you know, those memories when the people have, it seems like you're normal one day, next day you wake up and nothing is there, and you just need something to click back into like gear, something is misstepping, or it's like, you know, like it's just like, oh no, I don't want that. You know, like just like you kind of forget now, and you're like, man, you shrug it off, like, maybe I had a bad day or something. But then now this guy is, because of his age, he's losing his mind, and you're like, oh, you're trying like, oh, you're gonna remember them, and you're like, right, remember, everything is gonna be okay. And of course, there is age into account, and people's decisions.
It's interesting, Rossi, when you showed that first page you opened to was Lester.
Yeah.
And I haven't seen him in 4 or 5 years, but seen him with the cape and the mask. Yeah. And my heart just kind of stopped and skipped that beat. Like, oh, there he is again. Like, I forgot how cute he was and how fun he was to work with that. He does a good job of putting characters in your head that you can, you immediately see, and you're like, oh, I want to go back to them. Or you have kind of a sense of responsibility to being with them. So, yeah. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Is it underwater welder or is it underwater diver?
I think it's welder.
Is it? Okay.
I think it's welder. But yeah.
I think you're right too.
He's a creator I've got to get into more for sure. Like, I just haven't read nearly enough. So
The first book, the first 12 issues of Black Hammer are great too. That's another one where, I mean, he's got Golden Gale, who's a 50-year-old superhero, gets transplanted into a 9-year-old's body. So she's 9 years old on this farm. So she's like skipping school and breaking into bars and going and smoking in the bars, and just, he does a wonderful job with those first 12 issues of Black Hammer as well.
And also it has the most beautiful library editions, if you can get hold of them. They have like, I looked in the bookshelves, like I started collecting them in singles, but I dropped down because they were kind of going somewhere else. I didn't expect in the storyline as well. Did it end? Did it actually have?
I think it's still going. Yeah. He's turned it into his own universe, basically. Yeah,
but then that's the way the girl character, she was like smoking and she's like really young, and then she goes to school and she swears like, I don't want to do this. I'm 50 for God's sake, and then everybody's like looks at her like, she's like, are you mad? Probably something happened to you. Your hormones are going viral, and she's like, fuck.
That's my favorite part. Yeah, she's like 9 years old with a beer in one hand and a cigarette, or she's like in elementary school in the bathroom, like smoking and stuff like that. And I was immediately hooked into that series when I met Gail. That's her character's name. Yeah.
She has puppy mouth as well because of her age, and then she's like, they're like, what she's on about? It's like she has to be picked up from the school.
Yeah.
And she hates that shit in like that fucking way. And then that old guy who is basically kind of like gels them all together. It's really good storyline as well. Once again, character-wise, is really good as well.
Yeah.
But if it hasn't yet ended, it's kind of interesting how far it can go. I mean, like, because of the universe and superhero part. But when he went to space, didn't something happened there, and then I think I lost.
Yeah, it feels like it went all over the place. They were talking about it on Friday on the Hangout on Jared's channel. They were briefly talking about it, how it's just kind of like seems to have just its own universe. You know, I had started reading it when it came out and I was loving it, but it's just another that I just didn't keep up with. But such is life.
Being the collector that I am, I think I've got like the first 3 volumes of The World of Black Hammer, and the 4th one's on its way, and then like all the side stories, but I've only read the first 12 issues so far. So I really need to dive in and see, because that is the idea, is like, then Barb Alien gets her own little story and they run off with them, and the Colonel Weird gets his own and they run off with them. So it has expanded. So
don't you think that he has all elements like what you like? So Barbarian looks like Manhunter. Then that guy, crazy guy, what you just said. Oh, fuck, what's wrong with my brain?
Colonel Weird.
Colonel Weird. Yeah.
So he's from Hellboy. One of the things, it's just like, I think he picked up some things and just mashed them all together, because you can basically recognize it. And I think it's really easy to do that. You're reading comic books in a while, so it's kind of becomes like a interesting part of the story.
I think that was the thing that Jared was saying that kind of lost his interest. It felt like someone else, yet somebody else, exploring superheroes and referencing well-known superheroes, that he just kind of lost interest of this kind of like, just tell me the actual story, as opposed to creating something that's like talking about the Justice League and et cetera, you know what I mean? So I think that was his criticism of that there.
Because he had those elements, and unfortunately he wants to do doing something like that, he wants completely different, because of course, if somebody fresh to read that storyline, I bet they will eat them up and they'll say, oh, it's the best thing they have read it. But if you have a history with comic books, it's more judgmental you are, especially if you're aware of the superhero teams and stuff like that. It's kind of like you start to sense the elements of that, the same kind of factor. So
Well, hello, Scott Connor. How are you, man? Been a while. So one thing that I know Matt was reading as well, there was you had posted about it too. I think there was recently on like a PBS type station, there was a special about the Hernandez brothers and Love and Rockets. I ended up watching it when it was streaming live, and it was fantastic. Like for a PBS documentary, which is kind of, I guess it's the show that focuses on the arts and artists and things. I've since subscribed to their channel. I haven't watched anything else yet, but I'm curious to see what else they've done. It was a fantastic documentary. If you haven't seen it, it's well worth hunting down. It was just a really nice kind of snapshot. I was also, just on a quick aside, it was also great to see like the Fantagraphics guys like Gary Groth and Kim Thompson in there, like talking about the book and the impact and what they thought when they got that very first issue sent to them, of like, holy shit, stop everything. We've got to publish this. This is exactly what I want out of our company, out of Fantagraphics. So really, really good. So based on that, when I was, again, from the show yesterday, one of the things I found was, I guess this is kind of a reprint of volume 1. This was from a library, a discarded from Pinawa Public Library. So I found this there, and then I also ended up finding issue number 2 of Mechanics of this 3-issue series. I've only got 1 and 2. It was great to read this again, even though it was colored. And I know, Matt, you had read this as well too, so please feel free to jump in whenever. It was great to kind of revisit this stuff because, again, I'm always confused about the lineage of all of these reprints. But from what I understand, this is kind of earlier stuff, not necessarily the first stories, but early on in the Love and Rockets run. And I mean, I love this page just randomly open to it. I love that panel of her beating the shit out of that alligator or crocodile or whatever it was there.
This was originally printed in the first issue, but this is colored, yes?
This is recolored, yeah. So, and in the collection, when I went back and kind of had to sit down to look through this, I haven't started reading this yet, but when I started to look through it, a bunch of this Mechanics stuff from the Mechanics is reprinted here as well too, but then this is in black and white. So I'm very excited to kind of go back and revisit it again in this format. Mm-hmm. This Mechanics story, the only issue that I had with it, and it's a minor complaint, is this kind of diary format that it took. It was at times a lot of text. Like, it was a lot of text to kind of get through. The story was super interesting though. And I think one of the really good things that it did was it really introduces you to the world of what he's going to create. I mean, you get to meet a bunch of the main characters. You get some of that main storyline, and you started to get a sense of the world because, you know, there's this dinosaur carcass that's there alongside this rocket ship. You're getting introduced to like the wrestler characters and that whole kind of storyline. And there's a kind of throwback to the people that she's left behind. Mm-hmm. So it's a really good way to introduce you to that world. The other thing that I found was great here too was I love this backup story of Penny Century. I thought was really, really great. Hello, Celia. How are you? I found this Penny Century really fantastic, and just also seeing the different styles, you know. So this seems like it was maybe made more for coloring as opposed to the earlier stories, which were possibly made for black and white, you know, and then colored after the fact from Fantagraphics or whoever was coloring it. I'm assuming it was Hernandez brothers themselves, but I don't remember seeing a credit for that specifically. So anyway, what were your thoughts there, Matt?
Yeah, I'd read quite a bit of it before in those collected editions, those smaller ones that they've got from that. Yep. And I love the documentary was great because I love hearing people that are, you know, doing comic critiques and actually paying way more attention than I'm ever going to be able to, and have this literary background and start to point things out about how they laid out their panels, how you could read a panel straight across, or you could read it as an X. And like, if you notice in the X they're doing, and it was just like, wow, I've never looked at it in that way. It just gives you more incentive to dive in even deeper. And then it also made me want to buy the $400 box set that comes out. So that was a good thing. But I loved it. I loved the spaceship thing. I wish it would have got more into that because I've read the whole story with Maggie the Mechanic, and I love all the stuff with the spaceships. They talked about that a little bit in the documentary about how they went from Love and Rockets, and then they really went to characters, and they got away from the little bit of sci-fi. And I love sci-fi stuff, so I always wish they had done more of that in there. Mm-hmm. But this was great because, like you said, they introduced Vicky, they introduced Maggie. Hopi's in there. Rand Race is in there. We find out that Vicky might have cheated on her move when she got the belt, when she beat the wrestler. So like you said, in this one issue, you get introduced to all these different characters who play such a big role in their universe. I really enjoyed that issue. I do, however, like you, I do wish it was still in black and white. Yeah,
so do I. And that was a comment that somebody made, and I'm blanking on who exactly said it on Twitter. Somebody said that it didn't seem to be made. It might have been Donald, actually, who was here in the chat earlier, if he's still around. But that idea of, yeah, the coloring isn't the best for sure. I mean, as a when it compares to other recoloring that's been done, it's not nearly as offensive. But I mean, I really wish they would have just kept it black and white. Yeah. And I'm wondering, I can only assume that they were doing this format for it and re-releasing it in the hopes of getting a different audience to come to it. The ones that, especially at the time, I mean, in the 90s and stuff, when I was reading more indie stuff, it really was black and white versus color sort of battle. It felt like at times where people really shit on the books that were black and white, and then the people that loved the black and white really shit on the books that were colored, like in a pretty extreme way, in like a Bloods versus Crips kind of way, you know, where it was serious kind of fights about it, you know, like anything that wasn't black and white was fuck that ain't comics, and vice versa, you know, like, so I imagine that's why they did it, to try to get in a new audience anyway.
Yeah, I watched that documentary at 5 o'clock in the morning because I couldn't sleep, and I looked at Twitter, and you guys were raving about this documentary coming out. Chaos the Comics had the link, or that PBS, I guess, what's the thing I put through, and I just like, I started staring because I always want, and always I have collect those editions. I have that edition, the smaller versions, and I always look them on cheap because, you know, like, you know, lots of that, like there is a lot of work there, you know, to collect as one thing. And I was just like, I was so surprised because I wasn't growing up that stuff at all, that there's three brothers, there's more than three brothers. There's
that's right. Yeah.
There's the actual, the older brother was involved in them. There's some art there missing, but he's not doing that anymore because he wanted just to be a man of a family, make money. Yeah. That was really good, and I think that it really opened more mind to me to what they are, because that background is kind of like was not something I was expecting, because, you know, like when somebody is a creator and you don't have anything background, you only judge them as what their creations are. So I wasn't really knowing them that much, but that documentary really helped me to kind of background understanding how they were influenced by what they were doing, you know, like the comic part of this, like freely, and then they were just like on the whim created it. And I really like that moment when they say, I put that comic book on the couch and they were just admiring their own work. And that's just basically what you want from the work you create, just like admire it from the far. You see, like, oh, here you go, you know, we did it. And of course I looked it up, and they coming out of that bloody edition of that everything in one chunk. I looked up the price tag and I was like, fuck. But, you know, I understand the volume of work. It's well worth it, because just dwelling into some of it, because I was more exposed into the Luba guy, so which the brother
Palomar.
So I was more into, I don't know why, because that's the first thing I basically got into, because I found it for cheap and I started reading it, and I really liked that immersion of the one like woman basically in that imagination town, which I was thinking maybe it was the town in Mexico. I don't know, you know, like I wasn't really researching Google Maps and stuff. How she was such an integral part, and then you realize there's the brother part because of you guys, of course, on YouTube. You speak a lot about that, and I was like thinking, Jesus, there's so much more to explore, and I always wanted to, but I really like the bigger format, you know, like you guys. There's some. And then having that smaller format, it makes a little bit like huge difference for me, because I don't know. I just originally in magazine, the bigger they are, the better for me it is. And now they're coming that collected editions, and they were all hardcovers and slipcase. So I think.
I think so. Yeah.
It looked great. I mean, in the picture, I'm not sure how the product itself would be, but
I'm sure it'll be beautiful. I mean, you know, like they don't skimp. You know,
graphics they never do. No, just like they do all the justice in the world for the creators they are promoting, and also now, you know, seeing those graphics guys who actually came into like working that I know that information. Is like, I know this. How I was like patting myself on the back saying, oh, you know. It's kind of very interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. That's one of you mentioned that, Ross, and that's one of my favorite parts of the documentary, because it just put a light bulb in my head. I wasn't really thinking of it that way, but they were talking about how, you know, Luba kind of fills that side and how she's the main character. And then somebody in that documentary just says, but it's really Palomar. Palomar, the town, is a character in itself. And I am so hooked into that world as well, with the kids running around, them doing wash, having the bathing house. Just, I mean, Palomar itself is just such a magical place in my mind.
This volume here was the first one that I read. Like this was volume 2 of this collected stuff. And this is still so far some of my favorite stuff because this takes place in Palomar with Luba, right? Yeah. And it's so good. It's really fantastic stuff. And I mean, it was just so great to hear them talk about like where they came from, like that whole angle with like punk rock music, and the idea that I can't remember who was saying it specifically, the shots of like the band on the stage, you're looking at the audience though, and that idea of like that's what interested us the most. Like, yes, it's great to have stories about the rock stars and stuff, but we wanted to write stories about the audience, like us going to see these shows, and those stories, you know, like really just fantastic. And just their ability to just, and how all of them were just blown away by Jaime's kind of, holy shit, we had no idea that he was this good. Like he came to it this good, like right out of the gate, and it kind of blew away the other brothers as well too. So hello, Gary Usher, how are you? Paul Ravoche is credited with the colors and mechanics. Oh, excellent. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, I mean, I loved the whole thing, and I thought it was a really well done documentary too. Like it gave you enough information. It didn't dig too deep, but it gave you enough to kind of keep you interested and expose these great creators, and just what everybody was saying about them, about their ability to write these female characters in such a convincing, fantastic way, you know, that just giving them props for their creativity, you know. So
that's funny. It was what, 50 years, and they've 40 some years, and they had written the diversity that's in there. Just the diversity of characters, the sexual orientation of some of the characters. They were so far ahead of the game on so many fronts. I finished, and then talking with you guys, it's like, okay, I've got them sitting right over here, so I'm going to be, I think, pulling some out this afternoon once we finish our chat.
So it's interesting how the one documentary like that just makes you excited about the work again, because it's just open. Especially information you have not yet gathered about the creators itself, it really opens up to them, and the character they portray, they still have the punk rock feel to them, even though they aged. With them, so it's 40 years anniversary, and it's 40 years of those all and they basically like even Luba, I think one latest ones, I don't know what happened to her, but I know that she's aging as well. It's not because as far as I remember,
all of them are,
so it's interesting to see, and how one Jaime is the talented and the youngest one. The brother's like, shit, man. He's younger than us, and he's already had the shit. Well,
and also him talking about drawing these characters older, drawing them aging, and the challenge that is, right? Like still creating that character, still having them recognizable at that character, but trying to figure out how to draw them a little bit differently to show that age, like stuff that you never really or at least I don't necessarily think about. Like it's easy to, which maybe explains partially why some of these characters never age in some of these long running series, right? Because it's just easier to draw Bart Simpson as Bart Simpson, as opposed to like, I don't know what a 35-year-old Bart Simpson's gonna look like. Like, what are you talking about? So, and that ability to achieve that, because I haven't read any of the newer stuff. I've only read up to a certain level, but I would like to kind of keep going. And if I do remember, for those watching in the future, hopefully there's a link in the description of this video where you can see that documentary. I'll try to remember to add that in. I just wanted to highlight something that Scott said here too. Speaking of documentaries, the new one on Mike Mignola is very good. So that'll be something to hunt for as well.
I'm definitely gonna watch that.
Yeah. I thought one of the other interesting things with the Love and Rockets one was just hearing how the older brother kind of misses out on being able to do comics for the rest of his life, because he's a little bit older and he's got the family and the kids, and he's got to get a real job to go through and do that. So it was interesting just to hear how that little bit of age difference affected them. And I could just picture them in California sitting around with 700 pages of all these different books and collating them together, folding them and stapling as they talked about it. It was just a really cool visual to hear them go back and just to think about what was put into those just for the love of their medium.
And to get picked up so quickly, like for, they do this one thing, and next thing you know, they're skyrocketing. It's like, what do you mean, like a contract? What do you mean regular issues? We never, like, it's really Oh, here you go. Damien's putting some stuff in the chat there too. Doing the film festival circuit right now, and then list of screenings can be found there. vignoladocumentary.com/screenings. Thank you, Damien. Just that how quickly everything happened for them. I mean, when it finally broke, anyway, obviously there was a lot leading up for them as a family creating and things, but when it finally hit, it's like how rare is that, that someone bursts onto a scene like that. So yeah,
right timing and the right moment,
totally. Yeah, and the right company, and again, like the just sending it out to people, not being afraid, like we're just gonna send it out to. And then how quickly Marvel and DC came knocking at their door to try to get them away. And they're like, nah, screw you guys. We're doing our thing over here. We don't want any part of that, So, yeah, it's good. It's good stuff.
It's interesting how life decisions makes and what the path entails afterwards, you know what I mean? But I think Fantagraphics really did them a favor to become what they are. I mean, at the end of the day, them in that comics journal, which is like what you guys, I remember everybody's like, comics, what is this comics journal? I never think about it, who's producing, why is producing. But of course, if you listen more on YouTube, you'll find out about that. But then you realize how important that was mentioned there, and then there you go. And
it's a weekly thing here. We repeat a lot of things, but thank God for Fantagraphics, man. Like seriously, Fantagraphics. Without Fantagraphics, our comic landscape, I'm sure somebody would have picked it up. It would look dramatically different, though, than what we know. And I mean, it's why I think it's so important. Like, even though, again, Red Room, I've never read a single issue. I buy that shit. I want to support that company in some way because they need to exist long into the future. Fantagraphics,
But they're not doing badly. I think they still.
No, I think they're doing fairly well now. I mean, they've gone through ups and downs. This is definitely. I mean, what do I know? Maybe they're doing worse than I know, but it feels like this is an up for them, with their sales and things. And they're putting out these beautiful books like that Jim Woodring collection. I would love to get myself that one. This Love and Rockets, what they've done with 8 Ball, with Hate and Neat Stuff and stuff. They put out some really, really nice collections and well-deserved, man. Well-deserved.
They're putting out 8 Ball, but it's like in a graphic, not the hardcover. It's like
they're doing a soft cover that's going to collect everything because they have that slipcase edition. But now they're going to do one that's a little bit cheaper, soft cover, and it's going to collect all of the stuff too, which that's fantastic. But I mean, I'm always eyeballing those the slipcase hardcovers because they look just so beautiful.
I've been holding off on the Woodring one. For that, because that comes out this month. Is if you want to get the hard covered one, it's signed and everything. So
and that's the one I've been eyeballing. Unlike a Blaze,
this will be done proper. Yeah,
that's right. It'll be done right. Yeah,
I'm still amazed at the effects Love and Rockets has had, not on creators that were growing up reading them, but on today's independent people. Like a lot of the independent stuff that I read from that are DIY, self-published or small published. There's so much harkening back to punk.
Yeah.
And that all grew out of there. Like at times I feel like there's too much of it. Like people are still reaching and grabbing onto what they kind of created. It feels just it's a punk anthology and this is a punk book. And there seems like there's a lot of that coming back up now, but it's all built on the shoulders of what the Hernandez brothers did.
Totally. Well, and just that whole ethic, right? Of like just doing it yourself. Fuck it. We're not waiting for somebody else. We're going to do it because this is what we want to do. And we're going to create it. And if that means we sit and photocopy and put the staples in, screw it. We're doing it because we're not waiting for anybody to help us. Right?
And that's why I love these little things that people are putting out and they're spending their time and money. And you know that the creator who did it, folded it up, stapled it, mailed it himself, did the whole 9 yards. I like throwing money in that direction.
I think the Loving Rockets is hardcover, isn't it, Rasa?
Well, the thing is, I saw the image and it looks like they are hardcovers, but the way they took the picture, it's like really computerized. The slipcase sure is going to be hardcover. That's what I'm guessing. But the amount of money they're spending on it, the amount of money they're charging for it, I would presume it would be hardcovers because otherwise that would be kind of a.
Yeah, I think it's listed as hardcover.
Yeah,
it does say the hardcover everywhere I've seen, but it's a slip. You can say you basically tell slipcase. This is hardcover. So what the hell do you want us? But they don't really give you explanation until this is going to release and somebody's going to show. And now I'm saying, on like maybe I should just go on YouTube and say like I want to sell something. Can you guys buy me that?
You need a Patreon.
There's a pyramid. You just buy me that, please.
Yeah, we need to be sponsored by Fantagraphics. Go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, it's listed as 9.5 by 11.5, which is great, and it's listed as the format is hardcover.
Okay,
and the reason I say that 9.5 and 11.5 is because those smaller ones that I've got maybe 7 or 8 of those little volumes that Fantagraphic put out, those paperback ones, and they're like Rasa said, they're so small, the artwork kind of gets lost a little bit. That having it in a bigger format, that's what's really interesting me into pulling the trigger on it. But I got a month left to figure it out.
Hello to Ed, into it in the 80s when punk was still a thing. I discovered it at exactly the right time. Yeah. Says it will be 8 hardcovers in the description. Wow. That's intense.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I never even think about those kind of slip covers, but this, it's just, I don't know, it just draws me into it. But I don't know, like, what do I just sell my arm? And
yeah.
Like, give me that one.
One last thing before we got to wrap it up here. I don't know if Matt, if you had ordered this as well too, but I ordered, speaking of slipcases and hardcovers, I did that Ryan Simmons slipcase hardcover collection of all his Batman stuff.
Josh Simmons.
That's on its way, and I can't wait to see that. And again, one more jab for a Blaze before we go. It was 36 euros for the unsigned one, 39 euros for the signed copy. So for another 3 fucking euros a Blaze. And guess what? It comes on a fucking book plate in the book itself. So screw you guys. I got it. So I can't wait to see it though. But like, all joking aside, like the fact that it collects all that stuff, I cannot wait to see it because I loved that one that I have. Is just, it's so goddamn funny. I can't wait to see that version. So
did you order it right from Mansion?
I did, yeah. I went straight to them, yeah. Even though it was going to cost more for shipping and stuff, I was like, screw it. I'm going to go right to the source and make sure they get my money, you know. So
now tell me, who's publishing it and what's is that the Batman story you were saying about that funny one with everybody raped?
Yeah. Yeah, where Batman is naked basically and he's carved a bat in his chest and stuff. Yeah.
So it's in collected editions?
Yeah, because there's a whole bunch of, and it's Mansion Press directly from them, because I guess he did a bunch of them. I knew that he did more than one. I didn't realize there was enough to do. And I think it was you that told me about it, Matt. I didn't realize there was that many to put into a book. So, but it looks like a really nice, there's a video they posted recently. I think it might've been on his Instagram page, Mansion Press Instagram page, where they talked about, they show it off in a little bit of a video. It looks beautiful.
Where they located? America, I presume.
UK. Sorry, yeah.
France,
no,
I think.
Matt's right. Matt's right, yeah.
France. Oh, okay. So I can, then it's not going to be extortion. Because if I buy something from print, like in America, it's going to be like, I'm not worth in buying it because of the posting site.
No, it'll be cheaper for you for sure, yeah.
Mention Press.
Yeah, he's done a couple things for them. There's another one called Le Manor, which I really wanted to check out, which has gotten some good reviews as well. I reached out to Silver Sprocket, who I've been buying from in the US, because if you spend over $50, you get free shipping. And they weren't going to do a pre-order from it. They only pre-order their own stuff, but they said they were going to carry it eventually. So I'm holding out to get the free shipping. We'll see if they do get it in, and if I can wait that long. But I think I'm going to piggyback that in that Le Manor book and grab them both, because I really enjoyed that Batman book was so good. I was showing pictures of it to my friends that aren't into comics, and they were like, "What are you reading?" Yeah.
And apparently that Le Manoir or whatever is silent too, right? It's a silent book. So. Is that right?
Yeah. Le Manoir. Yeah. Well, that's
it looks great as well. Go ahead. Wait.
No. I just want to confirm this is the book I'm looking at, because it's the last thing I want to buy something else. Is this the one?
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, that's it.
It should be called Dreams of the Bat. Dream of the Bat.
It says, by Josh Simmons.
Yep.
Floating World also has pre-orders available, is what Rick Ray is saying. And he's also saying that he thinks there's a new Batman story in there as well, which I didn't realize that. If so, that's even better.
Great information. Thank you.
Yeah.
39 euros for book, slipcase, the book plate. Oh my god.
Yeah. It's insane. Like for 3 extra euros, you get all this stuff as opposed to $115 or whatever it was for a Blaze. Boo. All right, enough shitting on them. I got to get rolling here. So thanks very much, everybody, for joining us this week. Matt, it was great that we could work this out. I'm glad you were able to make it.
Thank you, guys.
And next week, we'll hopefully be back, on someone's channel.
What the hell?
Check out The Mobius Woman of the Sacred Heart is epic. Oh, okay. 62 Lefty Blues. Hello, by the way. Thanks very much, everybody. And we'll see you next week.
Much information.
Too much, yes.